What's up, Platinum Briefers? Nate here. And there is a brand new conflict between Iran and Israel. Now, this has a lot of implications for the world and politics, but there also is a lot of implications for the defense industry and the opportunities around that, especially as President Trump and the United States government has seemingly entered this conflict. Now, we're investors here, so we wanted to talk to the experts. So we sat down with the chief commercial officer from 3 Year Mind, Alexandre Donnadieu, right? So we sat down with one of the experts in this space in the defense industry who is making 3D software and more for the defense industry. We're talking for all different military assets, right? Currently on contract with governments from Germany and the Department of Defense as well. So he is an expert in this field, and we talked to him directly on what is going on and the opportunities that are created from Iran and Israel. Here's the interview. All right, we are officially recording, Alexander. Really appreciate you jumping on today and kind of answering our questions. There's a lot going on in the Middle East right now. And actually, as we're jumping on this call, President Trump is speaking to NATO. They have a NATO summit going on right now. And I have just a couple questions for you to kind of lead into that, and then we'll get into everything going on in the Middle East right now. So, when it comes to NATO, right, there's going to be now, they just announced 5% of GDP spending is going to go towards defense. How do you kind of see that now shaking up what's going on in Europe in the defense industry?
Yeah, so a pleasure to be here. First of all, it's kind of long due for Europe to get more into their defense investments, and we definitely see a shift. And by the way, most of the MODs didn't wait until this agreement was made by NATO to actually accelerate their investment in defense and what we call dual use technologies. We've been recently part of a few programs, especially with the German MOD, um, and as well as some programs with the Polish MOD as well. And we've seen like a definite shift for the last 6 months into focusing into kind of like rebuilding the defense organic industrial base and using new technologies, leveraging a lot what's happening in Ukraine as well for that purpose. So it's gonna definitely move the needle. It was long due, and we expect this to be a game changer in Europe and for Europe to catch up with the US on that.
Yeah, and it's really interesting too because in that sort of new plan from NATO, they have they have it kind of split up in two different ways. They have it split up in 3.5% needs to be spent on simply just defense, kind of direct defense kind of spending. And they have the rest like 1.5 on kind of like these auxiliary defense, right? Communications, radio, kind of, can you break that down for me when they say course sort of like more like direct defense? What does that mean? And then kind of this sort of auxiliary communications, like what kind of communications are we talking here that could see some spending?
So first of all, you need to understand something is that for a long time, a lot of countries that were saying they were investing 2% of their GDP in defense were
Mhm.
putting in that 2% a lot of different things. And some of this, some percentage points, 0.5, 1 percentage point was actually allocated to somewhat related defense things, right? So you can put whatever you want and calculate things however you want actually down the road. Now they're making things a bit more precise. It's not only that it's going to be 5%, but it's also going to be kind of like rubrics, and
Mhm.
different type of investments. So there will be also NATO will be looking more precisely into, is it really defense you're doing here, and not locating a little bit of GDP extra, percentage points to defense related things. And when it comes to the core defense things, we're talking about weapon systems. So things that are directly related to deterrence and military actions. And then there's of course things that are related and more on the dual use realm of things. That's what the 1.5% is about. Is like things that might be also of civilian use, that are absolutely necessary for either the logistics or the infrastructure of warfare.
I see. And can you speak on, how much currently, because this sort of plan isn't supposed to be up and running fully, that 5% like you were talking about, until 2035. So I know the United States has been kind of contributing a lot to defense spending in Europe and in a lot of different places in the world. Right now, what does that look like? What does spending look like right now in Europe? And how are we seeing that beginning to shift? Or, beyond just this new NATO kind of deal, where has kind of the shifts been?
Yeah, so mind that there is a political will to go in that direction, and we've seen some investments, um, you know, coming and new programs being opened, but the Europe is still figuring out that. For
Mhm.
example, Germany has um, secured 100 billions of euros of new budgeting for their army, which is unprecedented since World War II for Germany. And this new budget is still kind of being figured out. Like, it has been approved by the Bundestag, their Congress, and now the German MOD is kind of like identifying the different opportunities together with their prime suppliers, the OEMs, in combination with other nations, with NATO, with EU, and so on and so forth. So there's still a it's still very administrative, and they still need to make it more concrete. So it will definitely be a ramp up phase. That's why we have like there's a timeline of approximately 10 years. It's because
Mhm.
a lot of things will be needed to be done, but we definitely see some things changing slowly but surely. And especially when it comes to we do a lot of work with Ukraine, supporting the armed forces of Ukraine, and we see here definitely an acceleration in allocating budgets, program support to Ukraine, and kind of shifting from the fading away U.S. support to more European based support.
Yeah, I wanna get into what, your company is doing here and kinda how the spending has shifted there as well, but I do wanna ask just one quick follow-up on sort of the NATO issue. Now, you kinda mentioned, 100 billion euros going into Germany, right, o over time, and are there European equivalents of companies where this money is kind of flowing into, right? Because in the United States, we have obviously some of your main kind of defense contractors like Lockheed, RTX, right? All these sort of companies. Is kind of that spending going into European equivalents, or these American companies making and being sort of the leaders in the defense industry?
So it's a big topic. There will definitely be some American companies because some of them have some unique weapon systems that are needed, or even like infrastructure, even software systems that are kind of unique and very advanced. Uh, but the goal of the European countries is also to have their own industrial base and their own OEMs and production system and proprietary system. You can see that especially with Rheinmetall, for example, in Germany. Rheinmetall is a big OEMs producing weapon systems, ground vehicles specifically, and now getting into doubling down into their investment in developing new systems and so on. By the way, partly in the US as well. So
Mhm.
but you'll see a lot of this money flowing into, you know, local companies. France is a good example as well because they've been developing, for example, a company like Nexter that became KNDS, together with Germans. Actually, it's a co-investment, and this company is delivering the Caesar howitzer. It's a system that has been widely used lately and very very performant in Ukraine and also in the Middle East, and they will be for sure, some of the prime getting a lot of this investment. Airbus will also get some investment. Thales in France. So there is a few champions in Europe that will be kind of like the prime for getting that, but for sure there will still be some collaboration with American OEM.
Gotcha. Let's get into Iran and Israel now. Obviously, with this conflict kind of breaking out, the United States entering it, do you see, and especially with President Trump now at the helm here, do you see shifts in the Department of Defense in the United States budget kind of moving more towards Israel, more towards kind of spending in the Middle East with President Trump, in office now? Do you see DoD kind of shifting budget increasing?
The DoD has been actually shifting budget away from Europe towards what we call the Indo-PACOM, so the new Indo-Pacific region, which includes the Indian Sea as well as the China Sea up to the Pacific. This is this big white region that has seen more and more investment actually for the last actually 6 months. So it was already just before Trump coming up. So there's a deep focus that is now being set on that part of the world, and we've seen a lot of investment already starting by the Navy, especially the Marines, and the DoD as a whole, in all the bases that you can see, from Guam to all the bases that are around Japan and so on, to create some sort of a resilience distributed system that includes both weapon system and logistics. So this shift is well ongoing, and of course will be accelerated with what's happening with Iran right now. Uh, um, but the new administration is making it more vocal
Mhm,
and stressing on that, but it's actually something that has been kind of like playing out for a little while already. I would say that Ukraine was somewhat disrupting a little bit that plan, because it has been there in the backlog for a while, but now you can see that the more decisive moves are being made toward this region. So you can see, so Indo-Pacific and also CENTCOM. So CENTCOM is the common for Middle East and Central Asia. This is going to be also another increasingly important region. You
mhm.
have a lot of bases, American bases in the Gulf, in Qatar, um, in the UAE, and so on. So this will require a lot of investment as well to strengthen the capacities there, and ramp up containment of potential adversarial countries. Of course, and this goes along with kind of like the elephant in the room here, which is China,
Mhm.
because that's kind of like the ongoing theme when we talk about Iran. Of course, it's like very very much in the news, but at the end of the day, the underlying theme is being up to speed. And to quote some senators from the Armed Forces Committee, is it's for America to get to the speed of relevance again, and there is a lot to be done actually to compete again in terms of innovation and speed with China.
Mhm.
And China has made some very important strides in different domains, and now it's about like making sure that all the that America has its presence back in terms of technologies, in terms of bases and military components, because China has been progressing substantially in the what we call the CENTCOM region, Central Asia up to Middle East. Um, so that's going to be very important as well.
And do you see any sort of different sectors seeing bigger capital inflows from investors or kind of shifts in the DoD budget because of this Iran-Israel kind of conflict?
Yes, for sure. But again, I think the Iran-Israel conflict will just emphasize and accelerate that. But that has been a theme and an ongoing kind of shift in investment for a little while already. And the things we're seeing is um, more integration of both operational capacities, so military capacities, and the supply chains, for example. And I'm talking from our angle as well, because we do software for advanced manufacturing and digital twins for military supply chains. So um, for sure, we'll see. You can look at what happened in Ukraine, for example, when Ukraine is fighting the Russian invasion. The supply chain in that conflict and rapid innovation in production has been a key a key enabler of Ukraine's capacity to defend themselves against Russia. So being able to create a fast-paced, um, let's say, drone production system on the ground, with fast iterations of, innovative system and components is key. And America is seeing, like the DoD is seeing this as one of the next big opportunity for investment. So investing in infrastructure for on-demand, fast-paced, production. So that will require excellent integration between software and hardware, basically, and great transparency between the branches in terms of what are the inventory available, what are the need on the ground, and so on and so forth. So basically, an infrastructure that would act as a battlefield operating system, right? This is
Mhm.
definitely where we're going in integrating all the components of the military value chain, the front line, but also the supply chains and the logistics as well, up to design and redesign capacities for, new systems production, uh, repair and adaptation to the need of the battlefield. So it's a highly changing environment with new, you know challenges and issues, and systems need to be up to speed for that. um Another thing that we see a lot in terms of investment is what we call C2, which is command and control, or C5ISR, which is basically everything related to battlefield, or situation awareness. So being able to have better, vision and transparency on the battlefield. That's also another big learning of Ukraine, is that there is almost total transparency on the battlefield. Everybody's seen
Mhm.
everywhere, right? With drones, with satellite capacities, with sensor capacities, and so on and so forth. So having a better visibility on the battlefield will be something really essential for future warfare. Another example of that, I don't know if you've seen that, but it's pretty impressive how Iran became kind of like a open book when it comes to mapping, ground mapping, and knowing where the different bases stands, and so on and so forth, right? So
Mhm.
really, for a long time, until the recent year, the battlefield was a everybody was talking about the fog of war. It's like we don't know where the enemy is. We need to guess. We need to put our units in a way that it anticipates every move, and so on. Now we know everything pretty much, right? We have the means to know. So investing in C2, C5 ISR, situation awareness will be key, as well as integrating with supply chain intelligence and infrastructure for on-demand production. I think that are the things that we're seeing, especially in our end, as big investment opportunities.
Yeah, 100% agree, and that's a lot of the stuff that we're covering in our report too, is we're talking about how war is really changing, and because of all these technological systems like you mentioned. Now you kind of answered this a little bit already, but I want to dive a little bit deeper into what your company kind of does to optimize the advanced manufacturing process for military systems. Can you speak a little bit on how you guys handle that?
So our company does software, highly secured AI-powered software to first analyze the military inventories. So identify the part and that are actually suitable and suitable to advanced manufacturing, and especially 3D printing, industrial 3D printing. So parts are basically either, you know prone to obsolescence, have high failure rates, that have also that have some supply chain constraints, and basically that are ideal for on-demand distributed production, right? So we have algorithm that scan a multitude of data points, and then from these data points, help engineers within the armies to digitize their inventory, and find the best routes and the best technology to produce on demand the part they need on the ground, right? So it gives them a lot of transparency throughout their inventories, a lot of flexibility when it comes to getting the part they need when they need it, and reducing the lead times for that by 90 to 95%. So really, it's a kind of like a middleware between the the war fighters that are on the ground and the support units that are helping with engineering and repair part and supply chains.
Now, is there a particular military asset, we're talking like drones, tanks, artillery, right, that have benefited most from sort of the software that you guys produce?
So interestingly enough, legacy systems like for instance, a lot of the systems that were sent to Ukraine by supporting nations, including of course the U.S. And legacy systems are like old system like M777s, Howitzers, or M113 infantry vehicles. This type of systems were really uh, um, instrumental in helping Ukraine defend themselves, and are still instrumental, even though it's not like very new systems. The M777 is really robust as an artillery system, and for future warfare, we need to still have this type of system in the mix with the UAVs and the new ways of warfare, right? So we address a lot of this type of systems that are considered legacy, where a lot of the repair part are either hard to get or the supply chain are too complex and so on and so forth. So this is an example of systems, but of course the UAVs, GVs, the naval drones, and so on. It's also growing substantially because here you have like a lot of high impact parts, plastic, mainly some metal parts as well, that require high mix, high volume production and supply chain that needs to be field adapted and really short development cycles. So this is another example where we see a need for on-demand advanced manufacturing, and where we see a lot of our customers needing our software to cover.
Now, because of this conflict breaking out between Iran and Israel, and now the United States kind of sort of joining it, have you seen from your company side any increase in inquiries from the Department of Defense for your technology just recently?
Yes, definitely. Um, and we've seen, actually we've been in that business of working with the US DoD for now 7 years, and we've seen a few different administration. And actually we come mainly from the civilian sector, so we've been working with companies like Ford, for example, for a little while, and we had the opportunity to work first with the US Navy back in 2018, and then all the branches, pretty much all the branches. And what we've seen is a shift between testing software and using it as mostly an R&D innovation a tool, to something more operational. So we see now more of a concrete vision and a maturity into how to use software, how to integrate the whole value chain up to the front line, as opposed to just having a pure dichotomy between, frontline, military operations, and supply chain. So this integration is definitely happening, and software and interoperability of software is key. And this is where we actually solve a lot of issues, especially when it comes to interoperability. We have a very adaptable system. So we see that it becomes more and more concrete. So and we see the investment shifting from pure, what we call SBIR, innovation R&D investment, to more program of record based investment, which are basically more engraved within the acquisition and appropriation system of the US DoD. So there's definitely a move here towards more maturity to software.
Gotcha. Is there anything now that's being talked about in 2025, or even in, you want to get more specific, June 2025, that wasn't really being talked about in defense 6 months ago or a year ago, right? Are we now seeing different countries or different companies now talking about some issues that were kind of, not being talked about before, but are now front and center? For instance, one thing I've been seeing a lot of is, especially when it comes to Iran, is sort of these cyber hackers, right, and cyber defense, right? So, is there something similar to that that's being talked about a lot now that really wasn't being talked about before?
Um, there are many things, and that speaks for how, kind of like warfare is shifting. So you can take
Mhm,
any level, from workforce, like, I mean, war fighters, recruitment, and training, up to supply chains, like I was talking about. There are changes pretty much everywhere. Cybersecurity is still obviously a huge topic and has always been. Um, but we see more and more, like, the topics that are really being addressed right now are, I would say, I want to take two things. One, which is technology. Like I said, and this is a very important point, battlefield are becoming transparent. So how do you deal with this? That's a big, big issue, and company that may be able to tackle that as a whole, that sector, will be key. And also within that, autonomous platforms, systems like drones and whatnot will be paramount, because, with all the jammings, now everything is transparent, but everything is jammed as well. So communication are always disrupted. You've seen a lot of changes, for example, in the Russo-Ukrainian front, with drones that are, first you saw the emergence of the FPV drones, and then jamming system were blocking all the drones, and then the Russians started to have the fiber optic drones, wired drones, and this made a lot of like a big difference on the battlefield, actually. So jamming and so on is increasing. So now, if you are able to have more autonomous systems, like drones and so on, that are able to operate them by themselves without communications, interference possible, it's going to be super important. um, but also, I would say I want to talk about generally what is there's a big change in the way the industrial days of the US is shifting, because everybody realized that the way the um our Western countries, industrial base, like, the suppliers, the OEMs, the primes, as we call them, the tier one, two, three suppliers, it's a
mhm,
pretty much outdated structure, right? You have like big primes. You have half a dozen primes that kind of like funnel all the appropriations and the money, and these guys have like a very slow innovation, pace. Everybody is realizing, from the Senate to the White House, that this system is not flexible enough to kind of like follow the speed of relevance that is needed against China, for example. And
mhm,
so there is a big change in the whole structure of the market that is happening to leverage more smaller companies, and company that can really, have a fast pace of innovation and invest in risky technologies, right? So there is a need to really shift that model that is kind of like inherited from World War II, with big primes, a few big primes that funnel all the financing towards something that is more granular, with more innovative company in the mix. And that's going to be a huge work, and that's going to be require a lot of political, financial, and innovative effort to get there.
absolutely. And do you feel like there's a spot in defense spending right now, or spot in defense investment right now that is being underfunded, that you believe could see or should be seeing a lot more investment in the next 6 months, year to 18 months?
Yes, and actually, so, and I'm gonna talk for, it's actually being you see a little bit of change in that. and I'm again going to speak about my field, which is again software and things related to advanced manufacturing for defense. You see more and more VCs and investors going in the realm of um, eh, you know, software for distributed advanced manufacturing, and that has been, I think, underfunded so far, and it's shifting, like I said, with what's happening in the world. But I was recently talking to the founder of InQtel, Yin-Man, and he told me that is real focus for the future is really fostering interoperability of systems, and in the case of advanced manufacturing, so making sure that there's a full transparency of supply chains, and that you can collect very fast the need from operators on the field, and be able to adapt the backlog of production needed to serve as fast as possible with as much adaptability as possible the needs of the war fighters. This will require a lot of interoperability between the system, between hardware and software, IoT, right, IT and OT
Mhm.
systems, and creating what he calls that middleware between all these elements, um, and going more and more towards integration of supply chain, real time information on what is required and how we can get this, as well as what we call also uh, uh, um, the yeah, interoperability, like multi-domain interoperability, right? So between branches, between systems, between air and ground, and so on and so forth. So there is a need for that fusion, and it's a lot of work. It requires a lot of knowledge in software, hardware, infrastructures, work a lot on security as well, and this will require a lot of investment. So I see, this has been a blind spot so far, but it's really shifting, and many stakeholders of the like the investment technology world are going in that direction.
And, I'm an investor. We're obviously speaking to a lot of investors here who are not experts in sort of this topic. But if there's one thing that you can kind of leave us with, right, as a major takeaway about how software, is sort of revolutionizing the defense industry, what would be sort of the one major takeaway?
Software is the new is becoming the battlefield operating system. You need to think about a battlefield operating system, basically, right? So what does it entail, right? What are the different components that needs to be put together? How do you manage secured and really efficient system interfaces? How do you standardize data to be able to exchange data, from intelligence to operational data. And it includes, you know ground operation, and like I said, C2 C5 ISR, so situational awareness, but also supply chains, right? How do you match situation or awareness on the battlefield with stocks and inventories and so on and so forth? So, yeah, this is basically what I would say, is that how the army that will be able to create that battlefield operating system will really, really have an edge in the warfare of the future, and future proof their nations.
Yeah, the best operating system wins, right? And when it comes to now this Iran-Israel conflict, do you see this as kind of a moment of being a key opportunity for investors in a lot of the things that you mentioned? Or do you kind of see this conflict, especially with the United States entering it, sort of fizzling out and not being a huge opportunity for investors in at least the short term?
Um, I would definitely look at the long-term opportunity in a dual use context for everything related to defense, because of two elements. Is one, the unpredictability of geopolitical situation, and second, the kind of shifts and unpredictability also of the appropriation process of different governments, right? It's not that easy to get money from the end users, right? The customers, like the government. We're lucky to, be funded by the U.S. government and the German MOD as well, but it's a lot of work right? So
Mhm.
I would say you need to have a long-term vision to that. Iran is just one indication of where the market is going long term. Ukraine is another indication, and also like the increase of risks like military risk in around China, in Asia, and so on is also another indication. But everybody should think about investing in things that will have, first of all, a long term impact into the whole picture of geopolitics and defense, but also something that has dual use vision. Real like dual use is the new thing as well, because you need to be able to have a technology that will serve, of course, when a conflict is arising, but also when other catastrophes of like things like earthquake happen, or supply chain disruptions, or whatever. It's our case, right? What we're seeing, and I'm 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 gonna end it with that. But what we're seeing in Ukraine is that they want to invest in technologies that are serving the purpose of defending themselves now, but they also want to invest in technologies that will be able to help them rebuild the country, right? So it's important that the company you invest in have both the military and the after military vision.
Super interesting stuff, Alexander. Thank you so much again for joining us. And thank you again for lending kind of your expertise on this topic.
My pleasure.